Six Nations this weekend, folks. The final one, the big one, is France up against England. The old foes up against it. It's England trying to stop the French from going through and getting a Grand Slam. We'll know based on what happens against the Ireland and Scotland game as to whether France have already secured the title or not. Ireland are obviously hot favourites, and if they get that win, they'll keep their hopes alive. So France will have it all to do. Maybe the pressure will be slightly off if Scotland can get their first victory in Dublin in over like 10 years. But anyways, we'll see how things go. It's the big one, as I mentioned. We'll go through some squads, prediction stats, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how the game may or may not pan out. Now, France have got the big guns back for this. I remember their squad was a little bit disrupted last week with some COVID cases, but not so this week. I mean, the front row is the same. Baille, Marchand, and Atonio. Believe it or not, Cyril Baille, the loose head prop, is like second equal for offloads in this competition. Like, the guy has got some pretty silky skills. So don't sleep on that guy. He's been good all tournament. He can scrummage as well. Woki and Willemse are the second row. Willemse has got the most dominant tackles of the competition thus far. The man is a big unit of a man. Cros, Jelonch, and Alldritt are the back row. Alldritt's got the most carries of the competition. Jelonch is one of the top tacklers. All parts of that French forward pack have been firing really well. Not to mention the backs. Dupont is still captain. He's at 9. Ntamack's at 10. Dupont's another one of the top offload guys. He's one of the top defender beaten guys. He's just one of, if not the best player in the world. So, we kind of expect more of the same from him. Ntamack's almost gone into his shadow a little bit, but I mean, he's still up there. He's had like three try assists, I think. As I've mentioned a couple of times, he's not been running the ball a heck of a lot, but boy, has he been just pulling the strings of that French backline. Danty and Fickou are the same midfielders last week. Villiere is still there on the left wing, and he proves himself a handful both on attack and defence. Brought down big Talupe Falatel without any problems last week. Penaud is back into the side on the right wing. He takes the place of Moefana, who's kind of been shifted around a little bit, and then Jaminet is continuing on at fullback. I'll have to say, Jaminet has been good, but he's looked a little bit suspicious sometimes, a little bit fragile under the high ball. So I can't imagine England will not target him in this game based on their selections, but we'll have to wait and see. Mouvaka, Gros, and Haouas are the front row replacements. Telfa Fanua is also back into the side. Remember, he also missed out with COVID last time. Thankfully, they seem to have avoided like a big COVID spread throughout the squad, which is pleasing. Flamand, Creton are the other forward replacements. That means just two back replacements with Luku and Ramos. So Ramos, I don't even think got off the bench last week. He was kind of unused. So yeah, that's pretty much, based on what we've seen in recent times, the full strength French starting 15. So the French are going, for the jugular, absolutely, and I don't blame them. England have made some changes. They've got Genge, George, and Stewart as their front row. So Stewart gets to start this week. Remember, Sinclair, I think, had to go through return to play protocol, so didn't get to train the full week, but he's cleared to play. He's on the bench. And Stewart was pretty solid last week. Genge had all the kudos coming his way after a big scrummaging performance against Ireland. They'll be looking to do the same against the French, although from what the Irish said in their press conference, they seem to believe the officials let England get away with a bit. We'll kind of have to wait and see if there's any adaptation from that this week. Etoje and Ezekiel as the second row member. Yule's obviously suspended after his red card last week. Eddie said that Ezekiel, he really backs him come line-out time to be one of the top men, so that's part of the reason he's been selected. Laws, Underhill, and Simmons are the back row, so good to see Sam Underhill back in. Eddie basically said that he's just finally back fit, and that's why he's been selected. Remember, Curry went off injured in that last game, so he's not available, but having Sam Underhill come in, certainly not a bad replacement, and Laws was huge last week as well. Ben Youngs starts at 9 ahead of Randall. Eddie again mentioned that he wants to see Randall's pace coming off the bench as a finisher, and I can't help but expect Ben Youngs to be putting a fair bit of boot to ball in this one. Marcus Smith still there at 10. Slade and Marchand still there 12 and 13. Noel and Stewart are the wingers, so Stewart's moved from fullback to make way for Furbank. So yeah, Eddie basically said the French like to kick it a lot, and he's right. Their kicking from hand stats are pretty high compared to everyone else this competition. And yeah, he's picked a back three accordingly. Nick Dolly's in on the bench. Joe Marler, Sinclair, like I mentioned. Chesham's in as well. Don Brandt, who's had like the most turnovers won, I think, this competition. He's there on the bench. Randall, like I mentioned, Ford, and Daly. I think Maro is second for turnovers won, only behind Don Brandt in this one. By the way, if you want England rugby gear, last I checked they were having like 40% off. So definitely check that out come end of season. They're always having some specials on, so have a wee look. In terms of the stats, France, like although we give them credit for being this amazing attacking team, they've had some of the best defensive stats this competition. Like their tackling percentage is like 92.9, so pretty much 93%. Like the competition overall is pretty high, like it's 90, but for France to be even a few percentage points above an already high rate is speaks to the phenomenal nature of that team. They've had to win some pretty tough ones this year. It's not been all easy going. They've also had the most turnovers won. They've had the most offloads, and a lot of their other numbers, like they're maybe not number one, but they're number two, like clean breaks and things like that. So yeah, France just looking like a very well-oiled machine. Interestingly, they score most of their points in the first quarter and the least of their points in the final quarter. But that being said, they don't concede many points in the final quarter either. So the final 20 minutes of the French games usually pretty quiet on the points fronts. Not a lot being scored either way. For England, their attacking stats thus far are only ahead of Wales and Italy. And remember, Wales' stats are a little bit behind everybody else, partially because they haven't played Italy, who tends to boost everybody. Like everyone's got a big boost in their offensive numbers when they've played Italy. So that's not great reading for England, but they've won a lot of turnovers, like I mentioned, like Don Brandt and Itoje are right up there in winning turnovers. They love to maul it more than all the other teams. Whether they do that against this big French pack will be a question. More than all the other teams, England concede points in the final 20. Now, I think I mentioned that last week as well, and last week partly it's due to the red card and the team just being tired. But England have conceded 71 points, of which 41 were in the final 20. That's a lot. That's not just the Irish game, but partly it's the Irish game. So, yeah. Clean breaks conceded, though, they're actually pretty high as well, unfortunately. Only team that they're beating in that regard is Italy. So some of that looks like kind of bad reading, but I don't know. I think you'd be kind of foolish to write off England going into this one. Recent record between the teams is actually in England's favour 3-2, but over the last 5 games, it's basically been whoever has been at home has been the winner. So that may bode well for the French. The most recent result was a pretty tight one. I think Itoje got a late try in that one, 23-20 at Twickenham last year. Average score across the last 5 games is 24-18 to England. But England's last win in France was 2016, so quite some time ago. It is on at Stade de France. It's on at 9 o'clock local time, which is 8 o'clock GMT. Jaco Piper is the ref. Predictions-wise, France with the bookies by 8 points. France with the Rugby Forecast algorithm by 7. Honestly, I truly think this is the biggest mental test for this French side that we have seen thus far. They are on the verge of doing it. They've got the skills. They've got the talent. They've got the tactics. They've got the right coaches. Like, it's just that bit of mental fortitude they need to get through one more game to get that Grand Slam. And if they get it, I feel like they're going to be even more dangerous than they are right now going into a World Cup. But it's still 80 minutes of game time. And Eddie Jones may have said they're not going in just to play spoilers. They want to have their own party. I'm sure he would love to block a French Grand Slam and potentially put them in second place for like the 3rd time running. We will see. It should be a pretty interesting one. It's on ITV for you guys in the UK. If you guys are outside the free broadcast territories and you want to see this epic one, it's going to be on live and on demand on ITV. I'll use a link down in the description for a VPN. You can jump on there if you want to watch this one. Should be a pretty big game. You guys let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.